And the disciples were called Christians first in Antioch. Now, I want to talk quickly about the term Christians, because the term Christians is only used, you're not going to believe this, 3 times in the Bible. Did you know that? 3 times in the whole Bible the word Christians is used. This is one of them. Let's go to 1 Peter chapter 2. I'll show you another one. 1 Peter chapter number 2. There's 3 instances in the Bible where the word Christian is used. It's used here where it says, hey, that's where they were first called Christians, was in Acts chapter 11. Chapter number 4, it says in verse number 15, it says, but let none of you suffer as a murderer, as a thief, or as an evildoer, as a busybody in other men's matters. Yet if any man suffer as a what? Christian, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify God on this behalf. And then the other time that it's used is when Agrippa, which Acts 26, this is where Agrippa has just heard the gospel from Paul, and he says unto him, Agrippa, verse 27, King Agrippa, believest thou the prophets? I know that thou believest. Then Agrippa said unto Paul, almost thou persuadest me to be a Christian. So we got 3 times in the Bible, right? We got where it just says, hey, at Antioch was the place where they were first called Christians. Then we've got Agrippa saying, hey, almost thou persuadest me to be a Christian. He's the judge, presiding over this trial, as it were, and even the judge is about to get saved, is basically what's going on there. Because, King Agrippa is kind of sitting in judgment of him. He says, hey, almost thou persuadest me to be a Christian. And then in 1 Peter 4, he says, hey, if you suffer as a Christian, rejoice. What do these 3 mentions all have in common? Think about it. In the first mention, we saw someone that's not one of them is calling them Christians. That's where they were first called Christians. Is this a term that Jesus coined? No. Something that the apostles came up with? No. It's just something that they were called. The people in Antioch called them Christians. Okay. Agrippa, a non-believer, basically says, hey, you've almost persuaded me to be a Christian. Okay. And then we see in 1 Peter 4, they're talking about being persecuted for being a Christian. So it's always something that they were called by an outsider. Basically, I don't know, it could have been derogatory, I don't know, but they basically are calling them, you're a Christian, we're going to persecute you because you're a Christian, or, hey, you almost talked me into being a Christian, as crazy as that sounds. Like, that's what King Agrippa was saying. So what are the, but it's just amazing to me how people really latch on to that term. And I'm not against that term. I mean, it is a biblical term, right? Because God did use it really one time. In 1 Peter 4, that's God speaking there. And God used the term Christian. I don't think that Christian's a bad term, but it's funny how people just really latched on to that one term, okay? When really it's not the most biblical term. Really, if you want to get really biblical, you call those that are saved, you call them brethren, okay? Or you call them the saints. And that's really probably the best term that's used over and over in the Bible. I think that's one of the best terms, probably the most frequently used, I would say, is the saints. And then the other term is believers. Now, I like the term believer, because right away it shows you what salvation is. And I think we should bring that term back. And let's make that the big term, right? Let's make believer the big term. Because if we say, well, he's an unbeliever, he's a believer, because that's a very biblical term, used a lot more than Christian. If we use the word believer, then we're emphasizing the fact that salvation is by faith, not by works. Because we noticed we didn't say he's a worker. He's an unworker. Okay? A non-worker. No, it's a believer or an unbeliever. Okay? And I really like the term saint, too. Saint is a great biblical term. Let's not reserve that for some Catholic weirdo, the saint so-and-so. But sometimes we just think, oh, saint, that's Catholic. And nothing wrong with the term Christian, but this isn't Faithful Word Christian Church, it's Faithful Word Baptist Church. And I think Jesus came up with that name, didn't he? Didn't he say, among them that are born of women, they're not risen a greater than John the Baptist, okay? And so that's a biblical word. The word Baptist is used a lot more in the Bible than the word Christian. So what's wrong with saying I'm a Baptist? I mean, me saying I'm a Baptist is actually more scriptural than saying I'm a Christian. But even more scriptural than both of those would be to say I'm a believer. I'm a saint, right? And so I just wanted to say a little bit about that term Christian. Not a bad term, don't get me wrong. I'm not criticizing the term Christian. I'm just saying I'm going to emphasize what God emphasizes. Whatever terms He uses the most, that's what I want to try to use the most. And whichever ones were just more something that were called by other people, hey, I don't mind picking that up and just wearing it as a banner. Yeah, I'm a Christian. Absolutely. If somebody asks me if I'm a Christian, I say absolutely I am. Because God did use that term one time in 1 Peter chapter 4.